The Princess and the Human, Book 2 ch. 20. It wasn't as if Falpine had ever not respected Her Highness, but her respect had significantly grown. She knew her parents had a lot of work to do as well as other duties managing the county. She had seen them being busy and knew the same would eventually be expected of her as well. And she was learning all about it with her tutors. But she had never actually been directly involved in the process and just now realized the true scope of it all. She had been told that the princess was responsible for only Homie's foreign matters, but she had completely underestimated what that entailed. It wasn't just meeting ambassadors, negotiating, and eventually signing contracts afterward. But she did so much more than that. Countless treaties needed to be audited frequently, reports from advisors needed to be reviewed and occasionally discussed. She even drafted laws that she would send to her parents, and so much more. On top of that, she currently could only use 2 of her arms. Falpine couldn't even imagine how restrictive that had to be. And she also needed to do all of this while being bombarded with messages from the high nobles containing requests that sometimes were so entitled that Falpine got embarrassed just from reading them. Was it normal for ducal clans to act like that? Rikin isn't going to turn out like that, right? And apparently, those messages were already pre-sorted by the head maid. Just how could someone look at such a mountain of work to do, knowing they would only be able to do a small fraction of it before the day ended and stay calm? And then, there was also everything about Lady Nadine. She had absolutely no idea how she was supposed to process what the alien had told her. Remember, you're supposed to ask questions if you have some. Falpine flinched as she got suddenly called out. So far, she had mainly sat next to the princess while she worked, occasionally getting handed documents she was supposed to read. The current one was something she had seemingly spent a lot of time on. Or her expressions were just that telling. It's nothing important, Your Highness. Please, you have so many more important matters to think about, don't worry about me. I'll figure it out. At least as soon as she knew what exactly she even needed to look up, the princess put her datapad away and turned her head. Lady Falpine, you are here to learn and help. You won't learn if you don't understand something. And you can't help if you don't learn first. I don't doubt that you received a fine education, but actually doing it is something else. But it's really nothing, just something stupid. And you fear for your name's reputation by revealing, I assume, what you consider embarrassing ignorance. Yes, she admitted after a short pause. In that case, I have a message for you. From Nadine. The young heiress perked up. Believe it or not, Her Highness continued, but she expected exactly this to happen. Anyway, there is a human saying, he who asks may be stupid, he who doesn't ask stays stupid. While I would choose different words were I to use this phrase in public, the point stays. You're here to learn. You're no fool for not knowing that what you've never been taught. I understand, Your Highness. See, what I don't get, why are there always these huge gaps in the schedule? It feels like something I should know. Am I overlooking something obvious or? The princess was quiet for a while. Do you know what the hyperlanes are? She eventually asked. No, Then we found the issue. Falpine listened in astonishment as she, for the first time, heard about the complex phenomenon that connected the different solar systems with each other, and that was the only reason the alliance could even exist in the first place. I had no idea. You can get anywhere on Homie within half a day. And talk to anyone anywhere. She picked up her datapad again. Then, these 47 days in the table for example. That's how long it takes to just even get an answer. The messenger need to get from here to the entrance point, jump, pass the bridgeway, jump again, pass another bridgeway. Jump again, send the message, wait for an answer, and then do everything again in reverse. And the example you picked is a message that can send digitally via the relay station. If it was something that required them to personally go to the planet, it would be even more. We are lucky, but some planets are quite far away from their entrance point. Falpine was at a loss for words. She had completely underestimated what visiting a different planet truly meant. I guess I should have anticipated that you wouldn't know. Interplanetary matters bear no relevance to someone of your standing, except maybe when you put your name on the import list. She wasn't wrong. She had never really learned about this. Nor had she really cared for the stars above. That had only really changed when she had seen Lady Nadine during the broadcast of the trial and for the first time realized what fascinating discoveries she maybe could make there. And now, she lamented the fact that someone of her standing could never hope to see beyond the planet's borders. Anyway, I now have a meeting with the head of the Royal Research Institute. I trust you know what a priority order is? Yes, Your Highness. Priority orders are a widespread organizing method commonly used for. She interrupted herself as the princess raised a hand, signaling her to stop. This was not supposed to be a quiz, the princess clarified and sent a file to her datapad. I want you to try and make one. You may ask the servants for anything you might need. I'll check your work once I come back. And with that, she left. For a while, Falpiine just stared blankly into the air. She hadn't expected that Her Highness would give her such an important task and then just trust her to do it. Sure, she had said she would check it, but if what she did was unusable, wouldn't she just create more work? No, calm down. It's just a priority order, you know how these work. She looked at the case. It was about a big investigation the princess wanted to carry out on a planet called Iroas. Falpiine had no idea what species it belonged to, but then again, she barely knew the Alliance species anyway. As she skimmed the list, one word stood out. Relay station. Right, the princess had mentioned those. But was that important here? Her gaze wandered to the button on the desk. She had said she could ask the servants for anything, so this would be fine, right? She pressed it, and the door opened almost instantly. I need all the information you can give me about Iroas. The servant nodded and took out a datapad. We already compiled the most important information. What do you need to know, milady? Oh, you already have. Okay, what's the travel time? You mean between the planet and their entrance point? At the current time of the cycle and with an average traveling speed, about 16 to 20 days. The exact number depends on the ship. Ah, right, makes sense. Then priority number 1 must be. Ah, that must be why Her Highness is talking with the Royal Research Institute. Okay, yes, that means the first step is the assembly. Wait, the list mentions a report from Mirtan? What is that about? Admiral Mirtan is the one currently in charge of the home fleet. The servant then explained how the fleet was currently making a first assessment of the planet's state but was ill-equipped and would return soon. That would make all these steps dependent on his report. We can't do any of these yet. Is there maybe? What's a message jumper? That simply refers to a ship being sent through the hyperlane to transmit a message. The servant barely needed time to look things up. Was everything compiled so perfectly? Oh, so that's how they would communicate with the expedition. Wait, but then the relay station needs to work. Then that has to be priority number 1, so first we need to gather engineers and mechanics. Do you need to know anything else, milady? No, that should be. Wait, if it's alien. Who builds these relay stations? The Tystri purchased theirs from the Krasnelv, assuming it is still the same one. Oh, then we need people who know that tech. Slowly but steadily, Falpiine got things into order. Eventually, Her Highness returned, and the young heiress nervously watched as she went over the list without saying a word. Eventually, she put the datapad down and looked at her. Good. Rikin heard a door close behind him. Slowly, he was led into the room and eventually to a chair where sat down. Carefully raising his arms, he felt a table in front of him and adjusted his position accordingly. After an initial introduction on how everything would proceed from here on out, he and Falpiine had gotten separated. She was to stay with the princess, while he would be looked after by someone else. That someone else being Lady Nadine. Do you want anything? I am fine, thank you, Lady Nadine. There is no need for you to call me lady anymore. You know what's really going on. Right, there was also that. He still hadn't fully processed all the insane things he and his adoptive sister had learned from her retelling. Not only was she not an ambassador, the Vannery hadn't even made contact with her kind. Instead, somewhere out there as a sole human ship, its inhabitants hopefully alive but potentially spread out throughout Alliance space. Messages had been sent in all directions to see if maybe other Alliance members knew anything, and the few answers that had come back so far were all negative. But even if you are no ambassador, the rest we heard is still true, right? You are still part of the humans' nobility, you deserve this much respect. Well, that was hardly the main reason why it was a strange thought to get so personal with her. Every single evening since the trial, the two of them had rewatched the broadcast, he had listened to the alien's voice, and Falpiine had described how she looked, getting better and more detailed about it each time. And now, here he was, and if I were a commoner? Would I not deserve respect then? Rikin paused. Her voice sounded differently all of a sudden, but aren't you? I said if. The room fell quiet as Rikin didn't respond. She was clearly expecting some kind of answer from him, but he didn't know what to say. What was she trying to get at? Forget it, she eventually said with a sigh. Was she disappointed in him? I guess I need to get more gradual about this. Anyway, before we start, is there anything you want to know? I imagine you have loads of questions. He had, the one that popped up in his head first didn't reach his mouth. It felt like something he shouldn't ask. It's fine if it's a personal question. If I don't want to answer, I'll tell you. Well, from the way my sister described you, I thought you would feel different. How old are you again? She asked after a short pause. 7 cycles. Next cycle, I will be old enough to inherit the title. He wasn't sure how exactly that connected to his question, but he answered anyway. Lady Nadine once more took a moment before responding. Well, I don't know what you were expecting, but you weren't touching me directly. I'm wearing. For the sake of simplicity, let's call it gloves. You shouldn't touch my skin. Did I offend you? He asked in panic, now feeling bad that she had to guide him here. Should he have asked if that was culturally acceptable for her? No, don't worry. But, well, if you would touch me directly, your shell might dissolve. It got quiet again. Rikin felt as if the room had just gotten colder. Surely you jest, I wish. It probably wouldn't immediately, but it's a bad idea. Please just leave it at that. Her voice sounded different once more. This new tone made all the other questions he had left feel irrelevant. But speaking of feeling, how much exactly do you feel? Like, the table for example, can you feel the object itself of just the resistance? Or when I let you here? Did you feel the material of my suit or did you just feel the friction? I apologize, I don't understand the question. I see. Well, with all the screens, Braille would have probably been a fool's endeavor anyway since you only use screens. What I really don't get is why there is no text-to-speech. We had that stuff for centuries. Well, we'll see. Back on topic. You were educated in organization and leadership, right? I was, but that's good. There is a lot to do. We're about to launch a large-scale investigation on a different planet, and we need to be meticulous. Still, ahem. Her Highness is doing all the organizing, while I make sure everyone knows what they need to. And I want you to use your knowledge to provide insight and make sure everything is worked up properly. Rikin was frozen in his seat. Be it question or protest, neither of the two would leave his mouth. And the quietness that followed Lady Nadine's words somehow was almost worse. But then she spoke once more, and her tone was once again different. It was soft. Sorry, I got a bit too enthusiastic there. I didn't want to overwhelm you with this. Again, I'm sorry. It's hard for me to stay calm right now. I might finally make some actual progress, but truth be told, my part in this isn't all great, so don't understand this as if I'm dumping some huge responsibility on you. She paused for a moment. I heard about it. How everyone thinks your clan is done for. I won't force you into anything. But if you allow me, I would like to show you why I think that's bullshit. The Princess and the Human, Book 2 ch 21, Do you maybe have a smaller one, Sil? Silgvani sighed as the human handed her back her datapad. I had the last 3 times you asked that. But it's not like I freely have access to anything on the planet. Well, technically I have, but expropriation isn't exactly a route I want to take. Of course, don't do that, please. It's just, you know. The princess leaned back in her chair and nodded. This was far from the first time they had a conversation like this, so by now, Nadine's view of things wasn't as foreign to her as it used to be. The plan for a more thorough investigation of Iroas for potential clues to the other humans was now more or less complete. Except for the parts that depended on her uncle's report. It shouldn't take much longer for the fleet to come home and report their findings, and as soon as they did, they could finalize their plans and send the expedition on their way. In the best-case scenario, the soldiers had already found some clues regarding the involvement of Nadine's colony which they could build upon. Worst case, they would know where there was nothing to find. This meant that they had a few days of inevitable downtime which allowed Silgvani to get some other things done that were due. She decided to pick the more pleasant option, Nadine's award ceremony, first. Even though the small alien may disagree with her evaluation. Yes, I can. Somewhat see your position, Silgvani admitted. But this is already on the lower end. Remember, from the perspective of the noble clans, you are a foreign dignitary whom we are greatly indebted to for her deeds. If I give an award that makes me look cheap, my family's reputation will suffer even more than it already does thanks to my parents' antics. This estate isn't big by ducal standards, no, I cannot hold you to a lower standard than that, and the accompanying patch of land is only 8,000 fleek. Yes, I know. I also know that we've been through this, but I still can't help but feel like it's a waste. And that the current situation is so frustrating doesn't help. I once again can't do anything except wait. Once the expedition can finally go on its way, we need to wait again. On top of that, all of your messengers who returned from other planets so far came back with nothing except one with a very vague they want to meet, and for that to lead anywhere, we have to, again, wait. The hyperlanes make everything so slow. Nadine took a deep breath before she continued. I get that we might as well do something while we wait. Sorry that I'm being such a chore right now. Ranting won't change anything. And some distraction is probably better for my mental state anyway. She looked back at the image of the manor. This one is good. I swear I'll find a way to use it properly and not waste it. Also, can I just take a moment and say that your area unit is an absolute mess? Why aren't you just squaring your length unit, lines? Square? The site isn't a square though, Silgvani pointed out, earning a sigh from Nadine. Was she misunderstanding something? She knew how to calculate, obviously, but deeper mathematics hadn't been part of her education. Forget it. Out of curiosity, did you get that unit from somewhere else? Fleek doesn't sound like a Vannery word. I never really thought about it, we're using that unit for as long as I remember. But now that you say it, it could be. Well, you're probably using the same units alliance-wide, right? Wouldn't be too strange then. And it makes sense to sync units considering you're selling spaceships to each other. In the past, we screwed up an international space mission pretty badly once because the people used different ones. Still doesn't explain how this train wreck of a unit was what prevailed. The princess shrugged. Maybe it was the unit used by the strongest economic power at the time. Is it really that bad? I know how big an area roughly is if you tell me how many flake it has, but I never did calculations with it. Be glad, Nadine insisted, making Silvani chuckle. You know, you're getting better with our language if you can notice something like that already. Who knows for how long you'll need the translator? I'm not that good. Rehearsed speeches maybe. Damn, I just remembered, do I have to hold a speech for this award? Not necessarily, but some might see it as rude if you don't. Why is that an issue, anyway? You proved to be a decent speaker at the trial. Maybe, but I'm still bad with crowds. Fine, I'll try. That aside, how exactly do ceremonies like this go? Any traditions I need to keep in mind? Silvani sat back down behind her desk and opened the drawing function on her datapad. There are, she explained while her finger glided over the screen, but for most of them, it's not mandatory for foreigners to adhere. Appreciated. Yes, but even the dukes aren't self-absorbed to not realize how disrespectful that can end up being. The more formalities you adopt, the more they will like you, but they won't hold it against you if you don't. Okay. Why do I feel like you just said the same thing 3 times in a row? Silvani suppressed a laughter at Nadine's deadpan response. I just wanted to make sure you understand no one will be mad if you wish to keep your clothes on. The small alien blinked a couple of times, seemingly needing a few tigs to process what she just heard. Sil, please tell me that was just bad wording. I'm not sure how what I said sounded to you, so I'll just explain. I believe I told you that fashion is a concept we imported from other cultures? Yeah. When it comes to ceremonial circumstances, we keep things more traditional. Hence, no clothes. Finally done with her drawing, she put the datapad on the table so that Nadine could see the screen. It showed an assortment of lines, arranged in a shape that roughly resembled a torso. Has anyone told you about these yet? No. Nadine answered slowly as she looked at the image. Wait, that looks a bit like what Falpiine and Rikin used when they signed the NDAs. Right, I wanted to ask about that anyway. Yes, unlike you, we don't sign with our names. This is a line crest. Every clan has one, each of them unique. During ceremonies, we paint them on our bodies. Obstructing them would be seen as disrespecting our heritage. The human nodded and looked almost relieved. That makes more sense than how it originally sounded. Still, pass. I'll speak if I have to, but I will not speak naked. Yes, I expected as much. As I said, that is fine. Besides, I doubt humans have line crests anyway. We actually do. They're different, but some old families still have their crests. Hang on, I'll show you mine. Wait, your nobility holds no meaning, but your crest does? The princess asked, confused. No, it's just as irrelevant. But you know it well enough to draw it? It might be a vestige, but it's a cool vestige. Ours is on the simpler side, so it's easy to remember. We had it framed in our house, so I saw it daily. Does this have a color function? No, of course it hasn't. Okay, let's see. She kept drawing for a bit longer until finally, she revealed her work. Imagine the filled spaces to be black and the empty spaces to be yellow. It was indeed very different from a line crest. Judging by the shape, it clearly wasn't meant to be painted on the body. The centerpiece was a half-rectangle half-circle with a circle and a beam in it. On top sat a cylinder with an oval on top, and a bizarre, almost shapeless array rung around the entire thing. Yes, it would be difficult to use that like a line crest. I can have it made into an emblem for you to wear though. How does that sound? That actually sounds nice. Then I'll see to it. The two practitioners will probably appreciate some lighter tasks. We put them through a lot. Nadine let out an audible sigh. Sil, I told you it's not practitioners, that was just the translator being weird. Man, we need to come up with a name for this. But speaking of, how is your impression so far? Silvani leaned back in her chair, adjusting her position so it would be more comfortable for her two broken arms. The daughter of Clan Silpiine received a decent education. It didn't take long before I could give her some tasks and she performed well. To be completely honest, she was a big help and more or less convinced me to do this again in the future. The son of Clan Ryler. Well, you spent more time with him than I did. I only gave him work a handful of times. The results were decent though. He is more quiet and reserved compared to his adoptive sister, but he knows how to use his head. The biggest issue was that he always needed someone to read and write for him. It's fine for now, but he can't lead a duchy like that. The potential for people to manipulate him is too great. Yeah, he's aware of that. Some of my initial ideas are, unfortunately, out of the window, but I got some new ones. It depends on how certain pieces of tech work, but I need to speak with an expert anyway. Back on Earth, I'd know a dozen things that could help him, but you seem to have never invented them. But I think that at least on a personal level, I'm making progress with him. A lot will depend on his strength of will. Then how about you use the time until we get the report to work on your ideas? I can do the rest here myself. Nadine clenched her fist and nodded. After she left, Silvani retreated to her own chambers as well. Hopefully, they would get answers soon. There was also the matter of the illness. Neither the doctor or the Royal Research Institute had reported any results yet, and she wasn't sure whether that was a good or a bad sign. But on the other hand, she had learned something interesting about the alien girl. She didn't know if the crest was actually that important to her or if it was just a reminder of home, but maybe it would make her happy if, I need to meet some artisans tomorrow. The Princess and the Human, Book 2 ch 22, it's been a while since I last wrote. To be honest, it's hard to wrap my head around how much time has passed since then. When I looked at the number on my last entry, I needed to ask Maida to check the date for me because I was convinced there had to be a mistake. But no. It has indeed been an entire month. More than that when considering the longer days here. Sil isn't in the palace today. Neither are the siblings, they're accompanying her. I was offered to come as well, but I refused. The two seemed rather disappointed that I didn't come with them. A bit strange, I don't feel like we're that close yet. Or am I reading the signs wrong? Either way, I just couldn't bring myself to go. They're holding the trial for all the spies who worked for Kikla's goon and who got caught during the crackdown. Since it involved a foreign power, Sil once again has to be the judge. It's strange that the Vannery don't have dedicated judges. A verdict can be made by any noble who is of higher rank than the involved parties unless that's impossible. Well, I guess all nobles have to know the law. Still, it seems strange. But maybe that's just because I've only seen court cases of the highest order here. Going by what Sil told me, it's mostly a formality this time and the result is more or less decided already. They're all charged with treason. And Vannery law doesn't seem to know any extenuating circumstances for that, not even if they acted under threat. In other words, there isn't really a scenario where this won't end in a mass execution. I know she's just doing her job. Sil doesn't make the rules, yet, but being right there when she does it, I just can't. But for the two, this is probably great. They're being publicly seen with the princess, which is should be something good. I assume, well, my personal bias aside, they deserve it. I don't know how much of an outlier they are compared to other noble children, but after helping oversee them, I don't think they are like what I heard about most. The highest rank seem to have those the translator translates as Duke. It sounds like they can cause a lot of trouble for Sil if they don't see eye to eye with her. That's also the title Rikin will inherit if I remember correctly. Wouldn't that mean he could end up being a powerful ally to her? Well, not like anyone seems to believe that at the moment. I really need to start looking into some of my newer ideas. For example, the translator reads intent. Shouldn't that be compatible with some form of speech-to-text? I really need to talk with some experts. Not just because of that, if I were to stay on this planet, training alone probably couldn't compensate for the lower gravity. Maybe I should have done that sooner. They have artificial gravity tech, so this should be doable, right? Speaking of, Syl also said I would be getting a ship, crew, and everything. I still don't know how I should feel about this whole award ceremony. While everyone was gone, I spent most of the day trying to draw our crest as detailed as possible. They don't have colored pencils here, so it was a bit tricky. I hope it'll look good in the end. Funny, I never really cared much about it outside of thinking it was cool that we had it, but now. Dear Diary, it happened. Maida told me they just got a message. Syl's uncle is apparently on the way back and sent one fast ship ahead. They just left the hyperlane and will be here tomorrow, much quicker than expected. With the info they bring, we'll finally able to send the expedition force on their way. Now that I think about it, I haven't heard from Doc in a while now. I wonder if she found anything new. Over the course of the last couple of days, Falpine's view of the princess had shifted a bit. She was, of course, still a figure that demanded respect, but the more time she had spent in close proximity to her, the more she realized that Her Highness wasn't someone she needed to fear without reason. She wouldn't be able to properly put it into words if asked, but while her respect had only grown, the Sylpian heiress no longer felt as intimidated in her presence as she used to. Today, the princess had taken her and her brother with her for a mass trial. Falpiine had heard about these spies before during the trial of the ambassador, even if that hadn't been part of the sections she and Rikin had watched over and over, but the situation had turned out to be vastly different than she had expected. The people on trial didn't act at all like what she had expected traitors to be. Some had tried to talk their way out of it despite the evidence, some pleaded for mercy, and some openly admitted it. Apologized, and seemed almost relieved. It hardly fit the image. Of course, the outcome didn't change for either of them. Treason was treason. The executions were conducted right afterward, with no delay as no appeal time was granted. The two of them hadn't been present for that part. Instead, the steward gave them a lesson about all the paperwork that came with such a trial as well as some pieces of it to work on. By the time the group sat in the shuttle back to the Star Palace, the day was already about to end. Currently, they all sat there in silence while the princess looked at her datapad, checking the work the two had done in the trial's aftermath. Decent, she eventually commented. Lady Falpiine, you made some minor formality errors, but nothing big. That's something that'll come with experience. Lord Rikin, your work was less satisfactory. Falpiine could see her brother tense, and she herself, even though she wasn't the one criticized, shared the feeling. The displeasure in Her Highness's voice was audible. What had he done wrong? As far as she recalled, he had gotten a lot of praise in his previous tasks at the palace. What is wrong about it, why Your Highness? He asked in a panicked voice. Multiple things. For example, stating that some got sentenced on testimony alone isn't exactly accurate considering the evidence we had on top of that. Calling the list unverified is also untrue. I never dictated those things. He desperately pleaded, I know, but it's written here nonetheless. Because I told the servant to try and sabotage you. Falpine's brain needed a while to catch up with the last sentence, and even then, she was sure she had misheard. Her brother couldn't even close his mouth, only staring in disbelief. Your work isn't lost, don't worry. He also made a correct version. But imagine you wouldn't have been reporting to me but acting on your own. Imagine this would have been your orders to someone or something like that. How long, do you think, it would have taken for you to find out? How much damage do you think could have been done? Would you have even noticed at all? The two were still frozen in place when Her Highness put the datapad away and leaned back. That may seem a bit mean, but it is something you need to keep in mind. You will be a duke. You can't allow yourself to be manipulated. Not everyone around you will be someone you can trust, as today's trial hopefully demonstrated. Her words were harsh, but she wasn't wrong. It was likely the main reason why the other ducal clans expected Ryler to fall once he claimed his inheritance. Could Lady Nadine's strange ideas really help him? He had sounded pretty excited when he had told Falpiine about it, even though she hadn't really understood most of it. Welcome back, the head maid greeted them as they left the shuttle. Maida, if Falpiine remembered correctly. Your Highness, Lady Nadine wishes to speak. She has news for you. Thank you. Do you know what it is about? Yes, though I believe she wants to be the one to tell you. That sounded odd to Falpiine, but she didn't voice it. Instead, she let Rikin grab her right arms and guided him through the halls as they followed the princess to Lady Nadine's chambers. And that's four. They could hear her voice coming through the slightly open door. Damn it. I swear by the first ones, I'll get you one day. Well, would normally say something like then better don't slack, but considering the fact that the first thing you did after waking up was to call me and demand a game, I'd say you got that covered. But you're getting better. Anyway, got to go. The next game should be done soon. I can't wait. The princess opened and Falpiine could see the alien put the datapad away and stand up. Sil, ahem. Your Highness, good evening. Likewise. You wanted to talk. Lady Nadine nodded in a way that looked almost enthusiastic. Your youth heir, General Mirtan sent a messenger. Admiral, the princess corrected. Yes, that. Anyway, they'll be here tomorrow. Do you know what that means? It means we can accelerate our schedule, she confirmed as she turned to the two. It seems tomorrow we'll get busy. And with that, she left, leaving the two alone with Lady Nadine, who gestured for them to take a seat. Falpiine led her brother over to the chairs. So, how was the trial? She asked somberly. The two recounted their day, excluding what they had learned during the shuttle flight back. Rikin didn't seem to want to talk about it, so Falpiine kept quiet as well. Instead, they ended with the executions, even though they hadn't seen them themselves. During that part, Lady Nadine seemed to shift in her seat for some reason. I heard about it, she ultimately said. They will be thrown into space. Right? Yes, Falpiine affirmed. The law demands that no part of them will ever touch Homie again. The alien got quiet. She could get quiet to a degree that almost felt uncanny. Out of curiosity, she eventually asked, would nobles in the same situation be treated differently? Naturally, Rikin answered without hesitation. Lady Nadine's facial features shifted to a degree that made them almost look distorted, a change so fast it startled Falpiine. Her brother, oblivious to it, kept talking. After all, nobles always represent their clans, so their actions reflect on them. Clan members can easily be suspected as accomplices. A noble committing a crime as severe as treason wouldn't just doom themselves. Depending on the circumstances, they might cause the downfall of their clan. And just as sudden as the last change, her facial expression was more like it had been before again. Oh, she said. That's what you meant. Rikin tilted his head, looking confused. Yes? Are the humans' nobility treated differently? Remember what she told us, Falpiine reminded him. Oh, right. I apologize, Lady Nadine. It's fine. It's a foreign concept to you, so you have a hard time wrapping your head around it. It was similar for me. Though, in reverse, obviously. But now that you mention it, I can't recall hearing about anyone actually getting charged with treason in my country during my lifetime. I see. Well, a high noble being found guilty of a severe crime doesn't just affect their clan though. He continued his explanation, reciting their lessons almost verbatim. It can have rather wide impacts on the standing of lots of different parties. Like the execution of the son of Clan Gatry for harming the prince. Lady Nadine blinked. With prince, do you mean Kirtine? Yes. Is there another prince? No, but... When did that happen? I'm not sure, I think we heard about it. About 60 days ago? Yes, Falpiine confirmed. It was right before the rainy season started. Have you not heard of it? Many, not just the ducal clans but also a lot of counts were quite unhappy with how the matter was handled. No, I haven't heard of it. Please enlighten me. The Princess and the Human, Book 2 ch. 23, the destroyer Gatry had barely assumed its position in orbit when the shuttle bay was already opening. The landing vehicle, carrying Captain Jarkey as well as a few others, separated from the craft and began moving toward the planet. The Admiral himself had given them permission and orders to forego all normal procedure, giving them a special code that allowed the captain to act above his usual authority. As such, no messages were exchanged with the sector control outside of said code, and a short comment, no spaceport, be it regular or military, was marked as the destination. Instead, the shuttle headed straight for the Star Palace. On the one hand, the captain understood the idea behind this order, saving time. After all, it was for that very reason that the Gatry, one of the faster ships in the fleet, had been sent ahead. So far, so good. On the other hand, however, all these breaches of protocol felt excessive to Jarkey. They were, by now, multiple days ahead of the fleet, so was half a day sooner or later for the princess to get the report really worth all of this? The vessel shook as it entered the atmosphere. The Gatry had launched them from a position in high orbit from where they basically only needed to travel diagonally down in order to reach their destination. The shaking stopped after a while and he could feel the brake thrusters spring into action, steadily slowing down their descent. Some more time passed until finally, the pilot informed them that they had landed. A slight hiss was heard, then the door opened. Jarkey stepped out and took a deep breath. It felt good to finally breathe homie's air again after spending quite a long time on board his ship in space. The rain was rather heavy today, but it didn't really bother him at that moment. Welcome, Captain Jarkey. The voice of the servant standing in the open palace gate pulled him back into reality. Her Highness is already awaiting you, please follow me. She is? I had announced my arrival not even a day ago. It seems like she sees this matter as just as urgent as Admiral Mirtan. He entered the palace, following the servant. Another one stood beside the door and handed him a towel. The captain took it and quickly wiped his body without slowing his pace, then he gave the cloth back. For his entourage, it was the same. It was Jarkey's first time in the Star Palace. He knew about it, obviously, but seeing the interior in person was a sight to behold. He would have loved to spend more time observing the various art pieces bought or gifted from other Alliance members. Maybe after he had given his report. The walk was short and soon, they reached a small conference room. 4 people were waiting for him inside, one of them, of course, being the princess. My greetings, Your Highness. Jarkey of Clan Jarayan, captain of the Gatry, at your service, he introduced himself with a salute. She gestured for him to sit down, which he promptly did, all while quickly eyeing the other 3 people sitting across the table. 2 of them, sitting left of the princess, were children. Older ones from what he could see, but children nonetheless. Their presence was odd considering the fact that the topic of his report was rather classified. It was probably all right, after all. Her Highness herself was clearly permitting it, and they also both wore a sash in the princess's green. In the end, he opted to merely find it odd and quiet without voicing his thoughts. The final person on the table was not a Vannery. That had to be Lady Nadine. Jarkey had only heard about her briefly, and all he knew about her kind was that they may have some relation to the latest happenings on Iroas. What exactly this relation entailed was something he didn't want to spend any thoughts on. Jarkey got his datapad out and began his report. First point, the tunnels. After your departure, most of our manpower was spent on investigating those. The tunnel systems turned out much bigger than originally estimated, branching out in all directions and deep underground. According to Lady Kikla, those used to be the 4 biggest mines on the entire planet, the princess interjected. And considering that they apparently mined their world dry, it would make sense for them to be vast. That does line up with our findings, yes. Deeper inside, we found various ways of transportation that, while most of them were still functional, weren't in good shape. Many tunnels were also blocked, though it was difficult to tell whether they had caved in or were deliberately sealed off. Mining equipment was scarce, and most areas we found seemed to have been repurposed into some form of quarters, albeit with a very low standard of living, even by commoner standards. We've been, unfortunately, unable to fully explore the tunnels within the time frame, so it is difficult to estimate how much we've been able to map out. Which brings me to the second point, the Tystry. Jarkey paused and took a quick breath. He had been a soldier all his life, but this had been something else. The corpses we found were various when it came to their state. All of them seemed to have died rather recently. But not all died from the unknown illness. Some died from external wounds. Both accidents and fights are possible explanations. As our time was limited, we stopped counting after a few thousand. Seeing as all entrances to the former mining facilities had been locked, we've reached 2 plausible conclusions. Either the dead had fallen ill and were quarantined inside the tunnels, or the population hid in the tunnels from, for example, an outside attack, and during that, the illness broke out. By the time we had to make our way back, we had not found any survivors. Jarkey did his best not to look at the 2 children while he talked. The rest of the report consisted of minor details regarding the findings as well as a map of the tunnels as far as they had been able to explore them. Not many questions were asked afterward, and after transmitting the report, he was dismissed. Silvani quickly reopened the report on her own datapad. They were thorough with the tunnels considering their limited time, she stated before turning to Falpiine and Rikin. Judging by their demeanor, the report had been a lot to take in, to put it mildly, but with this as a basis, the expedition force will have a solid. That's pointless, Nadine interrupted without looking up. Her voice sounded a bit strange compared to yesterday. Agitated, what do you mean? Look at this. Look at how deep they went. What are the odds that even deeper, someone is actually alive? In an enclosed space with a deadly disease running rampant? Then, what would you do? The princess inquired. They need to focus on the surface, obviously. My uncle already did that, too. He didn't know what to look for, Nadine immediately said before the last word was even fully out of Silvani's mouth. I've completed my instructions for the expedition, and with a more steady line of communication and fewer time constraints, they'll be able to find clues he overlooked. Those might be also in the upper levels of the mines, but I doubt going deeper will be the right way to go about this, she explained. She still hadn't looked up once, and I just got another idea, she continued, tapping the datapad and opening the estimated timeline of events. I mean, here's what we know. All 5 warships the Tystry had left got destroyed. The Splanier, or a different ship with the same tech, arrived on the planet. A mutated version of a human disease, likely the common cold, rapidly spread. So far, no corpses were found outside the old mines. As it stands, I think it all comes back to the Splanier. Who has her? Where did she go? Nadine put the datapad back onto the table, still not looking up. We need to speak with her again. We have to know the essential necessities of the Tystry and what the best ways to obtain them are. That's all I can think of right now. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, Silvani nodded before turning to the other 2. I also want you to think about this matter. Write down anything you can come up with, even if it sounds minuscule at first. Send it to me by sundown." The two didn't answer, merely giving a confirming gesture. Then, Falpiine guided her brother out, leaving only her and Nadine in the conference room. "Is everything all right?" Silvani inquired once they were alone. "You seem a bit beside yourself today." "I know this was difficult to hear, that's not it," the small alien interrupted her once more, her voice monotonous. "I mean, I knew more or less what was coming. But there's something else. By the way, did you hear? His ship's called Gatry. Funny coincidence, isn't it?" "Coincidence? In what context?" "Clan Gatry is simply..." Wait, the princess stiffened as a thought crept into her mind. Say, does a Gatmer of Clan Gatry ring a bell? Nadine continued. I'm not familiar with that phrase you just, bullshit. You know from context what I mean. It was the first time today that Nadine had looked at Silvani. Her eyes were so narrow they had become barely more than slits. Silvani began but ultimately sighed. "How much do you know?" "Significantly less than I feel I should." "How come Kirtin never told me anything about some noble endangering his life?" "Sounds like something he would mention." Nadine's expression darkened further. "Did you make this guy a scapegoat?" What? Did you put the blame on him? Did you make him the culprit of what happened back in the forest?" Silvani didn't know what to say. Do you really think I sacrificed an innocent man for a cover-up?" "I don't know what to think anymore." "And instead you would," this time Silvani interrupted herself. "I didn't want this to happen either." "Didn't want what to happen?" And so, Silvani told the small alien all that had happened the day she had visited Kirtin in the hospital. As well as the days after, all the events that ultimately ended in the premature execution. Nadine was completely silent during the retelling and sometime after, only speaking multiple tigs later. "And when were you planning on telling me all of this?" "I don't know." "And your parents? Would you have ever told them?" "I don't know, so you lied to them." The princess wrung the hands of her two unbroken arms. "Technically not. I just relayed the doctor's words without commentary." "Sil, if you're technically not lying, you're lying." "I did it to protect you." "Did you forget my talks with them?" "Shit, looking back at that now, all I said." "Why did you never tell me?" This time, Silvani didn't answer immediately. Her eyes found Nadine's. "You had a lot to deal with at the time. I thought if I told you, you'd blame yourself for it, even though my actions were what led to this. And that's why you lied to me." That hadn't been a question. "Well, once you got better, it never really came up. And since things already were what they were, it wasn't really a pressing matter. And so you kept lying to me." It, once again, hadn't been a question. The small alien hopped down from her chair and walked towards the door. "Wait. Nadine." She tried to stop her. I get how you feel, but I wanted to protect me." She finished the princess's sentence, stopping for a moment. A couple tigs of silence passed before Nadine looked over her shoulder. Protecting and patronizing are two different things. She then turned back to the door and opened it. "I'll complete my notes for the expedition. You'll have them by sundown." Then, she left. Silvani now sat alone in the conference room. She would spend quite some time like this. The Princess and the Human, Book 2 ch 24. Kirtin closed the text and put away his datapad. He then leaned back and closed his eyes, mentally repeating everything one final time. Learning was still as boring as ever, but now that he had a goal in mind, something to achieve with this knowledge, it was actually bearable. For a while each day, at least, he thought about calling Nadine and challenging her to another round. It should be about morning for her by now. Over the last few days, there had been a couple of times when he had almost beaten her, he was sure of that. Then again, she seemed kind of distracted during these rounds. Was something going on over there? Being tied to this bed sucked. Just then, his datapad beeped. Surprised, he saw that Nadine was calling and quickly accepted. The alien girl's face came into view, and yet, she looked different today. The white, on which the blue gemstones that were her eyes were usually bedded, now had a reddish hue with thin, red, branch-like lines running through it. At the same time, her skin seemed to have lost some of its hue, morning. Do you have time right now? Hello, he greeted her back. Sure, I was just wondering if you're awake already. Actually, she began. Her voice also sounded a bit different. Rough? I've already been awake for a few hours. Invis, sorry. Really? I know you wake up early, but... What was the time difference again? He had only bothered to remember at what time. From his perspective, Nadine was usually awake, rather than calculating the exact time difference. Yes, I normally sleep longer, I just... Whatever, no need to concern yourself. What about you? Oh, well, nothing really. Same as always, so... You know. Anyway, are you up for a game? Sorry. Normally I'd love to, but today. Can we maybe just talk? The young prince was surprised. Normally she never turned down his challenges. I mean, we can, sure. About what? It doesn't really matter. Oh. Do you have more stories you haven't told me? I could probably think of some more, but... Sorry, but I'm... How about you tell me some things? That was also new. She had sometimes asked him specific questions about him, his family, or his people in general, but she had never been this vague. He didn't know any stories outside the ones he got from her. And there wasn't really a lot happening around him at the moment either. Do you want to hear about economics and business basics? Why not? Let's hear how you guys do it. It's something I only know very little about anyway. Little. Not nothing. Was there anything she didn't know about? He once again wondered what job she was aiming at to need this kind of spread out knowledge. But refrained from asking since she clearly wanted to listen right now, and he talked. Some basic theoretical stuff, as well as topics he personally had given priority. Not that he had told his tutors why exactly founding and leading a company was important for him. They probably assumed something befitting his status, but he didn't plan on correcting them. He noticed that talking with Nadine about topics somehow made it easier for himself to understand it compared to hearing it from the teacher or reading about it. Maybe he should do this more often. Time passed rather quickly, and soon, the human had to end the call, thanking him profoundly even though he wasn't sure for what. I have never written down any of the dreams I have had, but the one from last night refuses to leave my mind. I can't clearly recall how it began. Or where I was. Or what I was doing. The first thing I can still remember is that I felt the filling in my right back tooth break, pretty much the same thing that happened 2 years ago during the sleepover with Merv. I was at first only annoyed about it, thinking that I would need to tell Papa about it and make a dentist appointment. I remember feeling the loose piece with my tongue. I tried to get it out of my mouth but couldn't. In retrospect, I'm not sure if I opened my mouth. Well, dreams. After a while, I suddenly felt an entire tooth come loose for no reason. Which, again, only felt annoying. I don't recall what happened next, but at some point, my mouth was full of loose teeth, and I tried spitting them out but couldn't, and I tried again and again but still couldn't. I don't recall the next part, only that I was afraid. But at some point I thought I woke up. Then I was in a courtroom. Not straight away, but that was where it led. I don't remember if it was because of Kirteen or the executed noble, but I was blamed for it. They then brought me before a crowd. The crowd was all humans for some reason. The only Vannery were the ones from the trial. They had set up medieval gallows for me. With the expedition on the way, things had calmed down a bit. They had picked fast ships, but even then, it would take a while for the first report to come in. Silvani had given Falpiine and Rikin the day off, so she didn't know what those two were doing at the moment. For the princess though, there was still a lot to do regardless. The next item on the list was Nadine's award ceremony, scheduled to happen tomorrow. Nadine. Her thoughts quickly returned to the small alien. The two of them had barely spoken in the last couple of days. But as difficult as the situation was, it was far too late to reschedule. She wanted it to be a joyous occasion, and maybe it still would be, but uncertainty made her tense. Your Highness? Might have pulled her back into reality. You have a call from Hawa Industries. Put them through. The call was linked and soon appeared on her datapad. My greetings, Your Highness. To you as well, Lord Hawa. My thanks. You wanted me to call you once we were done with your commission. It was close, but we were able to finish it in time. That is good to hear. Thank you for accepting on such short notice. I would like to see it in person so you can go and install it. Would that be possible? Of course, I will clear my schedule for today. I will await your visit, Your Highness. On the following day, countless shuttles could be seen in the sky of Kalhanar, each belonging to a different noble clan. Under normal circumstances, it was expected that about 70% of the invited clans would send somebody, usually someone further down the succession line. On a day-to-day basis, Homi's nobility was mainly concerned with internal affairs. After all, external contact happened primarily through the royal family. As such, ceremonies involving foreign guests were generally seen as a formality that didn't warrant clan leaders to get involved. A cousin or third child was more than enough. Exceptions were cases when the clan in question actually wanted something from the species in question, maybe a specific product or an increased import of certain material. In such instances, ceremonies like these were a rare opportunity to flatter the ambassador in hopes of increasing the chance of meeting them personally, something that was otherwise rarely successful for anyone below the rank of a duke. As such, it was no surprise that the large hall adjacent to the Star Palace, the aptly named Star Hall, was filled to the brim. Each of the invited clans had sent their leader together with their partner and first child, with not a single one missing. Avoiding them all might prove difficult, but Silvani already had planned for that. With firm steps, the princess walked onto the stage. Clan Kiran's line crest was painted on her body in green colors, even going over her two broken arms so that the cast wouldn't obstruct it. Letting her gaze fly over the audience once again made it clear how interested Homi's nobility was in the new contact. Seeing every single line crest present 3 times was, while not unprecedented, exceedingly rare. A part of her wondered how many of them cared for the award itself at all. Though idle curiosity may have at least been a factor to some, the idle chatter soon died down and the Star Hall became quiet. Before she began to speak, Silvani spread her 2 remaining arms, then crossed them before her torso. The pose was a bit improvised, but that was her only option with just 2 arms usable. Her inner turmoil was irrelevant right now, she needed to be professional. Today, she addressed the audience, is a day of celebration. A day which I can only experience thanks to the actions of a special individual, and to whose honor we have assembled today. Repeatedly, she did our world a great service, motivated by nothing other than to do what is right. For that, I welcome in our middle, from the species of the humans, Lady Nadine Valentina Esmeralda Anastasia von Claude of House Haydenfeld. As Nadine took center stage, all Vannery in the audience went through the same motion, spreading their lower arms while crossing their other, followed by a half-step back. It was how the pose was actually meant to look like with a complete set of limbs. The small alien donned a special outfit, far more complex than what she usually wore. A silvery tabard, as she had called it, made to work together with her white protective suit rather than just going over it. Its edges were decorated with different patterns, small as to not draw too much attention but still very intricate. Additionally, black accents were placed on her arms reminiscent of the ornamental wrappings popular among Vannery nobility. And in the center sat large the crest of Nadine's family, her people's version of a line crest. It was rather obvious that it drew a lot of attention, clearly making the nobles speculate. Finally, her hair wasn't open like usual, instead tied back with a black ribbon. Lady Nadine, Silvani continued. The great service you have done to our home, and to me personally, cannot possibly be overstated. And while you were never driven by the desire for a reward, both our laws and our traditions demand apt reimbursement. I hereby grant you the title of an honorary countess. A plot of land and estate of befitting size shall be given to you, as well as a ship of our own making. May these symbolize the eternal gratitude of Homi. After a short pause, she turned back to the audience. As it is human tradition, the gifts shall be given in person, which we will do post-haste once the ceremony has concluded. An easy lie meant to thin out the group. Coming to the Star Hall was one thing, but then following them into the outskirts? The attendance would drop significantly. After a few moments of silence, Nadine's hands went to her neck as she once again took off her translator. Your gracious gifts honor both me and my kind, your highness, she began, her accent even less noticeable than during her speech at the trial. As long as they stand, they will show the ties our people have and will form. She paused for a moment and took a deep breath, and though we may not always see eye to eye, she continued, throwing Silvani off. Had that been part of the rehearsed speech? No, definitely not. Nadine had gone off script. But why? It will never be something not to overcome. Just like the ability to help may constitute a duty to help, good and earnest intention shall and will not simply be discarded. The small alien turned away from the crowd and now faced the princess directly. This connection means everything, one might say the world. We hope for an everlasting friendship, one that will not allow strains to tear it. Once she was done, the hall fell quiet, and Silvani noticed a single drop of clear liquid in the corner of Nadine's eye. Once she overcame her surprise, she released a breath she hadn't noticed she had been holding. Could her mouth move like the small aliens, she would probably wear a smile right now. To the audience, Nadine's speech might have sounded cryptic, but the princess had understood the true meaning behind the human's words. Yes. So do we. The Princess and the Human, Book 2 ch 25, technically speaking, getting sent on a mission that was far away was great. When they would patrol the bridgeway, there was always the chance of something coming up that KRNDL would need to handle. That was the big difference between patrolling and traveling. When traveling, there was a fixed goal that simply needed to be reached, and most problems that would come up during that had a solution someone else on the crew could provide, and thus, it wasn't her responsibility to take care of it. And no reason to make a decision meant no risk of messing up, and yet, KRNDL hadn't found a single TIG to relax during their long trip. Because no matter how many days they would spend on their way, they would eventually reach their destination. A thought the hunter's captain was unable to push away even once. Just how in the world did they expect her to do this? She could barely speak to her superiors without fumbling, and now she would converse with foreign royalty? She had never even talked to aliens. Sure, she had seen the ships when they were out on patrol duty, but on the rare occasions these ships would contact them, it would be about something the operators could handle on their own. And now, she was basically representing her planet in an unprecedented occurrence. How could that not go wrong? What was she even supposed to say when they would meet? She had never seen anyone else do that. She had no reference. Throughout the entire flight, she had frantically searched through all the databanks available to her, but she hadn't found a single recording of a dialogue that fit what she needed. Just then, KRNDL's personal console beeped, making her freeze up. She hated that beeping under normal circumstances enough already, and right now, it was much, much worse. It beeped again. With a shaking finger, she accepted the call. Yes? Captain, we have crossed the bridgeway and are now approaching the next entrance point, the operator informed her. Next jump in 80 tigs. We will open a channel to Homie as soon as we're through. Lacking the strength to answer, KRNDL merely nodded and closed the call. That was it then. The moment she had dreaded was here, and there was no way around it anymore. Her mind seemed to zone out as barely any time had passed when the beep pulled her into reality once more. The call opened and an image appeared. KRNDL knew what Vannery looked like from pictures, but she was, for the first time, eye to eye with one. This particular one wore a green sash paired with a couple of other adornments. What now? Should she wait? But the Vannery didn't say anything. Did that mean she was supposed to speak first? How was she supposed to know alien etiquette? I am KRNDL, captain of the Hunter and leader of Svegplia's 16th flotilla. I am here on official orders of the elders with an urgent message. As she spoke, the Vannery raised a hand, confusing the captain. Had she already messed up, Jai Rackle? Renavi Seki Ako. I'm sorry, what? Then, it hit her, translator. I forgot the translator. She made a hectic gesture, hoping the Vannery would understand it to wait for a moment. She needed a translator. Where did she have it? Did she even have one? Great, what now? Maybe the operators had one. But how should she go about it? She was supposed to be the captain. How could she openly announce such a stupid blunder? Unless. Maybe if she played it convincingly, Captain? The operator greeted her with audible confusion. I ordered a translator for Vannery in my cabin, she lied. Why is there none? A lot of people she could have given the order didn't hear that and the operator wouldn't go around asking, that way she was safe. Hopefully. Translator? But why? Oh, is there a defect? My apologies, Captain, I will look for one immediately. Defect? What was he talking about? Can you understand me now? KRNDL's head snapped back to the screen. The Vannery was now the one wearing a translator, seemingly set to Krisnelv. She quickly told the operator that the problem was solved and returned her attention to the call. Yes, loud and clear. My deepest apologies. No need, Captain. I can hardly expect you to foresee a malfunction of the built-in translator. Built-in. What is she talking? Wait. These things have built-in translators. This was her first time hearing about it, but right now she certainly wouldn't complain. Still, we should have checked that beforehand, KRNDL responded, doing her best to make her voice sound not shaky. I am KRNDL, captain of the Hunter and leader of Svegplia's 16th flotilla. I am here on official orders of the elders with an urgent message. It is in regard to an inquiry we've received but originally responded with a no. But new information came up, changing that answer. And with that, she had reached the end of the text she had been able to prepare in advance. I thank you for coming. I am Vassar of Clan Vasia, steward of the Star Palace. Her Highness is currently not available, but I will relay your coming arrival to her. She should be back by the time you reach the palace. I will send your pilots the landing instructions and see that shuttles are prepared for you. I wish you a safe remaining flight. Thank you, Y-. KRNDL interrupted herself and ended the call before she could say you too. With the final words of the short speech spoken, the Star Hall fell quiet. Silvani felt incredible relief as she and Nadine exchanged their coded words of reconciliation. She wasn't sure why the small alien had chosen this place to do so, but right now, she didn't care. For a short moment, her mind once again wandered back to the night she had almost died. How, just before it happened, Nadine stated that the princess had become like a big sister to her. I guess that also works with her analogy. Sisters might not always see eye to eye, but won't let it tear them apart. Nadine's unplanned change of course during her speech had been quite the surprise, but it wouldn't be the only one today. Despite how detailed their plans for the day were, there were some details Silvani had intentionally not told the human. Right now, it was time for the first of these surprises. This particular one, the princess had considered skipping after their falling out, but now she no longer had a reason to hold back. Demonstratively slow, she raised her two healthy hands before quickly bringing them together. A clacking sound echoed through the quiet hall as the soft shells of her palms collided. This, dear lords and ladies, was what's called a clap. In human culture, doing so rapidly in succession is meant to show admiration, congratulation, or cheer. When performed by a group, it becomes a ritual of acclamation known as applause. From the corner of her eye, she could see Nadine look at her in disbelief. Now she almost lamented the fact that she couldn't smile like the human would have undoubtedly done had their roles been reversed. Our two cultures might have only started to meet, but if the deeds previously listed do not warrant this applause, I don't know what does. So, dear lords and ladies, in the name of the aforementioned friendship, let us partake in this revered ritual together and honor Lady Nadine's actions. She clapped again, careful not to hurt herself while doing so. The audience was hesitant at first, but surely, one after the other joined, until the entire Star Hall was applauding. Silvani wasn't surprised that they all partook, considering why they were here in the first place. Still, she didn't miss Nadine's face becoming notably redder. Eventually, she stopped clapping and the rest followed suit. Now then. As announced, we will depart to sights of the gifts. When their shuttle took off, Nadine deflated in her seat, making Silvani suppress a chuckle. She had prepared a separate shuttle for the small alien, but it wasn't needed now as Nadine had elected to fly with her. The applause was a cheap shot. Nadine grumbled, still looking a bit embarrassed. Well, in all fairness, you started it. Heh, guess I did. Shit. I'm not saying it's all water under the bridge because that would be a lie, but I also didn't react all that great. So, how about this? Let's do our best to enjoy the day, and once it's over, we tackle the situation like adults. The princess nodded. Sounds good to me. And I certainly hope you will enjoy yourself. This is your day, after all. Don't you dare make this a national holiday. Or planetary? What's the right word here? Don't worry, I won't, she laughed. No guarantee about my parents though. Anyway, seems like our trick didn't thin the crowd as much as we had hoped. The house was first, right? Let's hope it'll become less when we go to the harbor. The flight wasn't far. Nadine had purposefully picked an estate that was close. The duo exited and waited patiently as shuttle after shuttle landed, spilling all the nobles onto the area. Despite being in the open, it felt quite cramped now. From here on out, whenever you visit our planet, this house shall be a home to you. It is fully staffed, and the surrounding land is yours to rule. Silvani then grabbed the door handle. It was time for the second surprise. Opening the door, she revealed two lines of servants bowing. And behind them in the center of the entrance hall, there it stood. She hadn't yet seen how it looked installed, hoping it would be good, and thankfully, it did. Lord Hawa's men had done a great job. Next to her, Nadine froze, staring blankly through the door and at the sculpture. It was an 8 lines tall, three-dimensional interpretation of Nadine's family crest, the very same that currently shone proudly on her chest and back. Deciding to give her a bit more time to process, Silvani kept talking about the house, the history of the surrounding lands, and some relevant lineages, all things that didn't really matter and were mostly a formality. Eventually, it was time to depart once more. When they reached the port, the audience had, once again, shrunken a bit, but less than expected. They gathered in front of one of the hangars. It was a smaller one, befitting the size of the ship inside. The ship Nadine had picked for herself was designed for a crew of up to 10 people, though being fully operational with 4, wherever your destination lies, it shall be a loyal vessel to you, the princess continued her speech. Made by our native shipbuilders and our best technology, and used except for test flights within the frame of its making, a proud witness of Homie's feats. She signed the servants to open the hangar. The doors opened, revealing the ship inside. Nadine seemingly didn't pay too much attention to it, understandable since she already knew what to expect. Or at least she thought so. That quickly changed once she noticed the final surprise, her family crest painted in bright colors, one on each side of the ship. Again, Sil, Nadine whispered quietly. You didn't need to. No. But I wanted to. It seemed like she had once again left the alien at a loss for words, so she continued her speech to give her more time before the nobles inevitably would try their shots. As she was finished and Nadine seemingly back on track, the human gave one of the servants a sign. He nodded and produced a small drinking canister. Makes sense that she's thirsty. Still, did she prepare it in advance? She must have if the servant immediately understood her. However, the small alien didn't drink, instead going closer to the ship. Silvani eyes her with curiosity, as did the audience. Once again, Nadine took off her translator and looked up at the vessel. Today, we come to name this Lady Argo and send her to space, she spoke. Lady? Oh, right, she said they consider ships female in her country, to be cared for by and to care for her crew, Nadine continued. I asked the sailors of old, the first pioneers of the stars, and mood of the cosmos to help her through her passages, and allow her to return with her crew safely. And to help me with my search. It got quiet once more when she was done. Silvani was about to take the word again to make sure everything now would go in an orderly fashion when Nadine suddenly raised her arm holding the canister. The princess cocked her head in confusion, a movement mirrored by many in the crowd. Then, they all simultaneously flinched in shock as the small alien threw the canister with all her strength, smashing it against the ship's hull.